the storm and the stranger. The wind howled across the frozen plain like some ancient, starving beast. It clawed at the abandoned outpost's metal walls, rattling rusted shutters and piling snow against the sealed hatch. Inside, Daniel Voss sat by the heater, sipping recycled water and watching the storm on a cracked monitor. Whiteout. Visibility 0. Just like every other goddamn week on Kalos 9. He preferred it that way. Out here, there were no calls from Earth Command, no propaganda feeds, no memories trying to claw their way up from the pit he'd buried them in. Just cold silence and the occasional malfunctioning drone to shoot for scrap. He reached to toss another polymer log into the heater when the alarm chirped, soft, almost uncertain. A proximity ping. Short range. He frowned. Nothing survived out there for long. No animal life. No human colonies within 500 clicks. He tapped a few keys. The external cam, blurry with frost, showed a silhouette stumbling through the storm. Humanoid, barely more than a smear of movement. Stupid scavenger, he muttered. Still, something made him hesitate. The figure collapsed near the entry platform, unmoving. Daniel swore under his breath and grabbed his rifle. The hatch shrieked as he forced it open, wind instantly cutting through his jacket. Snow blinded him as he stepped out, boots crunching over frozen metal. He reached the body, light, shaking violently. A woman, not human. Her skin was pale blue, almost translucent, laced with bioluminescent veins that flickered erratically. Her clothes were shredded, more ceremonial robe than survival gear, and her lips moved without sound. Slender fingers clutched at his coat weakly. Shelta. Daniel hesitated only a second longer, then hoisted her up. She weighed nearly nothing. The outpost's heat hit like a hammer. He laid her on the floor near the heater, stripping the wet cloth from her limbs. She wore some kind of symbiotic tech on her skin, half fused to her bones. It looked burned. Her eyes fluttered open, violet and unfocused. "Stay with me," he grunted, wrapping her in thermal foil. Her breathing was shallow, and her body trembled with tiny, painful twitches. He'd seen hypothermia before. She was right on the edge. He inserted a med-gel patch into her neck. She spasmed. For a moment he thought she was seizing. Then she exhaled sharply, her eyes locking with his. She didn't speak. Not aloud. Fear. Pain. Thank you. The words slid into his mind like a whisper in a dream. He staggered back. "You just get out of my head." Her mouth moved this time. "I'm sorry." Reflex. She passed out. Hours passed. The storm screamed outside as Daniel sat nearby, watching the strange woman sleep. She was alive, barely, but her body seemed to regulate itself unnaturally fast. Her skin had darkened from frostbite blue to a muted lilac, and her breathing had steadied. He nursed a cup of protein broth, trying to ignore the questions hammering in his head. What the hell was she? Why was she here? She stirred. "Easy," he said, putting down the cup. "You almost died out there." Her eyes opened slowly. "I know. Who are you? What are you doing this deep in the wastelands?" She tried to sit up, grimacing. "I escaped." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "From what?" She looked away. "The Relith Consortium. They took us. Experimented. My kin are all dead." Her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel had heard the name before. The Relith were slavers masquerading as a research faction, off limits even by galactic law. He'd seen what they left behind on war fronts. He leaned forward. "You're telling me they're active here?" She nodded weakly. "I destroyed the lab, took a stolen crawler, and fled. They followed. I hid in the storm, ran until I found this place." Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand over his stubble. Trouble had landed on his doorstep. Real, galaxy-sized trouble. "You led them here," he said, voice cold. She looked up at him, wide-eyed. "I had no choice. I was dying, and now I might be." Silence. Then she lowered her head. "If I leave now, they may spare you." He shook his head. "No, they won't. They clean up loose ends. Always." Daniel stood, staring out the tiny window as wind battered the glass. It wasn't his war anymore. He'd done his time, lost too many, saved too few. But the woman was here now, alive because of him. And something about the way she looked at him, like she could see the pain buried under years of anger, made his chest ache in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. He turned back to her. "You have a name?" "Siratel," she whispered. "All right, Siratel," Daniel said grimly. "Looks like we're stuck together." Her expression softened. "Thank you, human." He looked out at the storm again. "Call me Daniel, of stars and secrets." The next morning, Lyla woke with a strange excitement buzzing in her chest. She could barely wait to return to the cafe and see Veyr again. The image of his glowing markings, the calm in his eyes, and the quiet dignity he carried stayed with her all night. By the time the sun peaked over the horizon, she was already sketching hurriedly in her notebook, capturing ideas and faces that had been swimming in her dreams. She arrived at the cafe early, carrying a small bag of pastries she had baked the day before. The owner had insisted she share them with the customers, saying they had a way of brightening the dreariest days. Lyla thought today might be just that kind of day. The cafe was still quiet when she pushed open the door. Her eyes searched the room, and there, as if waiting for her, sat Veyr in his usual corner. His glowing patterns seemed to pulse softly in the dim light, and his cloak shimmered with a faint ethereal glow. She hesitated a moment, then approached. "Good morning," she said, offering him one of the pastries. "I brought you something." Veyr accepted it carefully, as if the idea of food was unfamiliar or ceremonial. "Thank you, Lyla." She smiled and settled into the chair opposite him, opening her sketchbook again. This time, instead of drawing, she showed him a series of small holographic videos she'd downloaded on her datapad. Clips of cats doing silly things, human music performances, and snippets of comedy shows. Veyr watched intently, his golden eyes wide with fascination. "These creatures, cats, you say? They seem curious and unpredictable." "Yes," Lyla agreed, laughing softly. "They're like little balls of chaos. And the music, well, that's us expressing emotions. Humans love making noise that makes us feel things." Veyr's gaze softened. "Your species is vibrant, alive in ways my empire has long forgotten." For the first time, Lyla saw a trace of something vulnerable in the great alien's eyes. It stirred a protective instinct deep inside her. As the day wore on, their conversation deepened. Lyla asked questions about his people's culture, their values, and history. Veyr spoke carefully, weaving his answers like delicate threads of a tapestry. "Our empire is ancient," he explained, bound by strict codes of loyalty and honor, but weighed down by endless politics and compromises. Lyla listened, fascinated. "Sounds kind of like human governments." Veyr's lips twitched in a rare smile. "Yes, perhaps. But," Lyla said, "humans are weird. We don't always follow rules perfectly, but we find new ways to survive and connect. Sometimes that means breaking the old patterns." Veyr considered this thoughtfully. "Your species is unpredictable. You're like a star that refuses to burn out quietly." "I like that," Lyla said, feeling a rush of pride. The afternoon passed in a flurry of stories. Lyla's tales of school dramas, human holidays, and silly traditions, and Veyr's guarded legends of his empire's rise and fall. Despite his status, he seemed to enjoy the simple human joy she described: the laughter, the food, the chaos. Occasionally, Veyr's expression would darken, hinting at deeper worries. Lyla sensed there was more to his story than he let on, but she didn't press. Sometimes a friend just needed to listen. Unseen by either of them, a small group of figures lingered outside the cafe. Shadowy bodyguards dressed in sleek, dark uniforms, eyes scanning every corner. They had orders to protect Veyr at all costs, yet they frowned at his growing attachment to a mere human girl. Back inside, as the cafe began to fill with evening customers, Veyr looked at Lyla and said quietly, "You show me a world I thought I had forgotten existed." "And you," she replied, "are the most fascinating person I've ever met." They shared a smile that needed no words. In that moment, across the vast gulf of space and culture, something rare was born, a true friendship. Lyla closed her notebook and looked around the cafe. "I never thought I'd have an alien friend, especially one who's so mysterious." Veyr inclined his head. Sometimes the greatest truths hide behind simple moments. As the lights dimmed and the cafe prepared to close, Lyla felt a sudden warmth, like a star's gentle glow inside her chest. She had no idea that this quiet stranger was an emperor hiding from a galaxy on edge. For now, he was just Veyr, the lonely traveler she had chosen to befriend. A shot in the dark. The cafe was quieter than usual that evening. The usual hum of conversation had been replaced by a tense, expectant silence. Lyla arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the windows. She found Veyr sitting in his usual corner, his glowing markings dimmed to a soft pulse. "Hey," she said, sliding into the seat opposite him. "You okay?" Veyr looked up slowly, his golden eyes tired but alert. "I sense danger." Before Lyla could ask what he meant, the cafe's door burst open with a sharp clang. A group of alien mercenaries, armed and fierce, stormed inside, the air filled with the acrid smell of plasma weapons charging. "Get down," Veyr commanded, his voice calm but firm. Lyla instinctively ducked behind the table as glowing blasts streaked across the room. She heard the shouts and the crashing of furniture. Panic swelled, but her eyes were locked on Veyr. He rose smoothly, his presence commanding despite the chaos. With a wave of his hand, a shimmering shield flared up around him and Lyla, deflecting several bolts of energy. One of the mercenaries charged toward them, but Veyr moved with inhuman speed. In a flash of light, he grabbed the attacker's weapon and crushed it, his strength far beyond anything Lyla had imagined. Heart pounding, Lyla grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and hurled it at another assailant, who staggered back in surprise. The distraction gave Veyr a moment to sweep the cafe with a gesture, knocking the attackers off balance. Suddenly, from the shadows, figures in sleek armor, Veyr's elite guards, burst into the fray. They moved like shadows, disarming the mercenaries with precise, non-lethal force. Within moments, the attackers were subdued or fleeing. The cafe was a mess, tables overturned, cups shattered, but the danger was over. Lyla emerged cautiously from behind the table, her hands trembling. She looked at Veyr, who now stood tall, his glowing markings flaring brightly as if fueled by his anger and power. "Why?" Lyla started, voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" Veyr's expression softened, but there was a weight in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "I needed to protect you from more than just these men." He paused, then said quietly, "I am the emperor of the vast Seraphis Empire." The words hit Lyla like a wave. The lonely alien, the quiet man she had befriended, was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "But why here? Why the cafe?" she whispered. "Because I sought refuge," Veyr said. "In the simplicity of this place, I found a moment's peace. And perhaps a chance to remember what it means to be human." Lyla felt a strange mix of fear and awe. The man she had seen as vulnerable and lonely was a ruler used to command and danger. Yet, here he was, sitting beside her, no different than before. "I'm not afraid," she said steadily, surprising even herself. Veyr looked at her, gratitude shining in his eyes. "You are braver than most in my court." She glanced around the ruined cafe, then back to him. "We've been friends. Does that mean anything to you?" He reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "More than you know." In the quiet aftermath, Lyla realized that this moment had changed everything. Their friendship had survived a storm, one far bigger than she had imagined. But the danger was not over. Veyr's guards spoke urgently among themselves. The political intrigue surrounding his empire was vast and unforgiving. Enemies lurked everywhere. "You must be careful," Veyr warned softly. "For your sake and mine." Lyla nodded, determination filling her heart. "Then I'll stand by you." He smiled, a rare, genuine expression of warmth. Together, then, as the night deepened, they sat side by side amidst the scattered remnants of the cafe, two unlikely allies bound by trust and hope, ready to face whatever the galaxy would throw at them next. An emperor and a girl. The cafe was nearly empty the next morning, sunlight streaming through the windows and casting long beams across the worn wooden floor. Lyla arrived early, heart heavy but resolute. She knew today would be their last meeting, for now. In the corner sat Veyr, his usual calm tempered by a faint sadness. His glowing markings shimmered softly, as if reflecting the quiet weight he carried. "Good morning," Lyla said softly, sliding into the chair opposite him. Veyr's golden eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "Lyla, thank you for coming," she smiled, forcing cheer into her voice. "I promised I'd visit, didn't I?" They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe the only sound between them. Outside, the galaxy continued to spin, vast and unyielding. "I must leave soon," Veyr said, his voice low but steady. "My empire calls me back. The peace I sought here was only temporary." Lyla nodded. "I get that, but I'm glad you found some humanity." He looked at her then, truly looked. "You have shown me a truth I had forgotten. Friendship born not of power, but of trust and understanding." She reached in her pocket and pulled out a small, delicate pendant. It was a simple piece, but in its center glowed a faint light, the emblem of the Seraphis Empire. "I want you to have this," Veyr said, pressing the pendant into her hand. "A token of respect and a promise." Lyla traced the emblem with her fingers, feeling its warmth. "What kind of promise?" "That humanity will be treated fairly by my empire," Veyr said, "and that, should you wish, you will be welcome on my world as a guest of the throne." Her breath caught. "Me? A guest of the throne?" He smiled gently. "Yes, because you are the first human I have trusted. Because your kindness and courage have shown me the strength in your people." Lyla felt tears prick her eyes. "I never imagined I'd meet an emperor, let alone become friends with one." Veyr reached out, brushing her hand with his. "Our friendship is rare, but it is real." They sat together, the weight of unspoken goodbyes hanging in the air. Lyla wished she could freeze the moment, to keep the stranger she had come to know close, without the shadow of empire looming over them. Finally, she stood, clutching the pendant tightly. "Promise me you'll come back." "I promise," Veyr said, standing as well. He bowed slightly, a gesture both regal and sincere. "Until we meet again, Lyla." She smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. "Until then." As Veyr left the cafe, his cloak billowing softly behind him, Lyla felt a quiet strength settle over her. She was just a girl from a small station, but she had befriended a galactic emperor, and changed him, too. Turning back to her table, she opened her sketchbook once more. The pendant glowed faintly in her hand, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can ripple across the stars. And somewhere, far beyond the reaches of the galaxy, an emperor carried the memory of a human girl who saw him not as a ruler, but as a friend.